for now, do you mind just stating your name and your title for me
Sure.
on camera?
Jeff Perera, Program Manager with the White Ribbon Campaign.
Okay, and what do you do in your job? What's a day in the life of Jeff?
Well, basically what I do is I spread awareness and word about the White Ribbon Campaign and our message, which is working to redefine masculinity and as a result helping to end violence against women and girls and creating a space where people can just be who they are regardless of their gender or sexual orientation. And that means me going to do workshops at high schools or universities and colleges, different community centers and spaces, presentations, talking to folks, just any projects and programs that we're working on to help educate and create awareness, working with youth and children and teachers and professors, etc. So that's the gist of what I do. Yeah.
So you mentioned redefining masculinity. How would you define masculinity right now in society?
Good question. Masculinity in 2012 is very diverse, but it's also very similar wherever you go in any space around the world, any culture, country, community. A lot of it is around being assertive, being tough, being capable, in control, having all the answers. So that means that you don't need help, that you know everything about sex, that you're not you don't back down. Because the idea is that you're in control and that you can handle it. And this is a impossible, unattainable idea and state of being for a human being. So this idea of what it is to be a man, for us at White Ribbon, the key is to kind of rejig that, redefine it, and say let's step back and take a look at this and look at, more importantly, how it's impacting us on a daily basis and how it's impacting the lives of women, the lives of LGBTQ people, and heterosexual males as well. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I know that you presented Words Speak Louder Than Words here at Ryerson, and you argue that a lot of the words that we say in here have more of a meaning than we tend to think that they actually imply. I know at the beginning of your presentation you mentioned the meaning of the word guys, and you talked a little bit about how if you walked into a room and said to a bunch of ladies, hi guys, they wouldn't care, but if you walked into a room and said, hey ladies to guys, they'd be all offended.
Oh yeah.
Do you mind expanding on the meaning of the word guys for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, the guys has become a gender-neutral term, and the idea is that you can call anyone regardless of their gender, how they identify, guys. And obviously, consciously, people aren't thinking of it for the most part in a way to kind of judge or anything. But when you start to unpack and think about the word and why it's been given this green light to be used for anybody, and you think of how other words would not be used. So, for example, ladies or calling everyone, women. That would not stand for a lot of men and for some women as well, because it's important for some people to have a clear definition and distinction between men and women. But the problem is that that distinction is built up in a lot of ideas of value and devaluing, of power and lack of power, and of superiority. So when you start thinking about, for example, insulting words, I think the greatest way to look at language and people's behaviors and attitudes is the way they insult each other. So the greatest insult I can throw at another man is to feminize him, right? I can call him, girly or soft, and then they can go down to horrible terms that are, female genitalia, and then calling him homophobic terms. Because the homophobia and transphobia, the root of it is sexism, is this idea that, a man's supposed to be a man, look a certain way, act a certain way, and be capable, be tough, and anything outside of that is considered feminine. And same thing if a woman acts a certain way and looks a certain way that's not fitting this narrow idea of what a woman is, she's called a bitch, she's called, lesbian, all these different terms to kind of push her back and know your role kind of thing. So, you think of the impact of words and what we're saying, it's really strong. And the problem is that we're so desensitized to it that we don't, on the surface, even appreciate or understand the nuances of what's going on when you hear these different things. Because these words are triggers and they push you in a certain direction to be something, or usually to be something that you're not.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what other constructions of gender have society created for males?
There's so many different ways in which the idea of what it is to be a man affects people. I mean, the way that men dress, the way that men, their physical being and health is a big piece. Mental health, physical health. So, for example, this idea of even just going to the doctor. When I do workshops, I ask people, how many of you know a man that will not go to the doctor? No matter, if it's your partner or your father or your brother or a friend, that no matter what's going on, the simplest to more complex issues, they'll ignore it, from a common cold to possible, heart palpitations and stuff. They'll just say, oh, it's okay, I'll be fine, I'll shake it off. And part of it is this piece where men feel a fear of vulnerability. So it's a fear of saying that I can't do this. I need help. I can't figure this out. And that problem then leads to other issues. And when it comes to physical states of being, the idea is that you need to look physically that you are capable and can handle things. And we associate in society this idea of man as muscular, as tough looking. And the idea of feminine is considered soft and petite and all these different things, because that goes with the stereotype. So when you have a guy that is differently able, say it's a man in a wheelchair, he's seen as less of a man. I love to point at that film Avatar, because it's a great example of a guy who was a U.S. Marine, and I don't know the story very well, but in the movie he's a man in a wheelchair. And the message of the story, the underlying message is that he'd rather be a blue fuzzy creature running around than be a man in a wheelchair, anything but that. So you think of like what that means for men, the pressures that men have to be not just healthy. That's not the goal. The goal is the appearance of health, the appearance of being strong. I think of guys going to the gym. I used to have a trainer, a personal trainer, and we'd go work in the weight room, and these guys would be physically look like you would think they're in shape. They're huge and just big, but she would explain to me how from the waist down they're not capable of running up a flight of stairs. You could probably do a better job than them, and their joints are out of whack, and they don't have their core is not in shape and things like that. Because for them, it's the aesthetic, is to look that I'm jacked, that I'm shredded, versus actually being in a state of health, right? And that's the problem, is that we create these ideas of masculinity based on perception versus something tangible, something real, and that's in all aspects. And when you think of mental health, it's another thing too, like not reaching out for help, reaching out for advice or for support. So in all aspects of the state of being in health, for men it's this kind of mask that they put on the appearance, and it's a mask to themselves, so they can't even focus or come to terms with it on their own. So they won't even look in the mirror, the proverbial mirror, right? So they're not going to be able to talk about it with even a partner or a loved one or a family member or even a professional.
So you talked a little bit about the wheelchair metaphor and how men who may feel like they have to look a certain way are kind of constrained and they can't really be themselves because they can't talk about the issues that they're experiencing. How would you tie that in with someone who's a guy and struggling with their own body image?
Well, this is the thing, I think that we could obviously speak for days and days about women and body image, and there's been a lot of work and analysis and attention in the media around that. But what we do is, again, with most issues around men and masculinity, we don't talk about it. So there aren't really spaces to talk about men's body image. There's a lot of men's health magazines, and the covers are always, a guy who's just got an 8-pack and this idea of lose your gut. It's not really about how do you get into a real state of health, and the conversation of why men might not be in a state of health because of the stress that they're internalizing that leads to them gaining weight or being underweight, and then more importantly, not talking about it because you can't, God forbid that you want anyone to know that you're struggling with an issue, that you're not capable of handling your stuff. The whole piece of man up, just shake it off, or be the strong and silent type, and not show that you're dealing with stuff. And this stuff is really, it shackles a lot of men because they can't, talk about things that are going on. And when it comes to things like body image, there's a perception that they might have that they need to look more muscular, they need to be in shape. And it can even be things like if you're a male that's in a dance program or long distance running, there's a lot of issues around losing weight, quote unquote, to be more effective, and then that will lead to issues as well. But again, the way we create masculinity is that the man feels he can't even talk about it, and regardless of sexual orientation, whether you're identify as heterosexual or queer, it's an issue in those communities as well. So it really affects every community, every culture, every space, every place, when it comes to wherever there's a man, there's probably a man who's not talking about this idea of body image. Because, there's men that, will say, I don't look in the mirror, I just get up in the morning and I go. And I'm honestly one of these guys too. Like, I just, I'll shave my head and I'll put my clothes on. Are they mildly clean? Okay, let's go out the door. I gotta go to a meeting, right? But I'm also conscious when I do think of it, of what I look like, when people are thinking of what I look like. But, for a lot of men, it's not reflecting that. It's like, oh, I don't care about how I look, and pretending that they're, not conscious of it. actually there's a woman that I came across. Her name's Lee Morgan. She does consulting for business professionals on fashion, and it's a big piece where for a lot of businessmen and professional men, they don't they want to put the appearance of that I don't care what I look like. I don't really have time to think about it. So they reach out to her for her advice. But when they do, it becomes a therapy session. She says because a lot of them kind of open up and talk about this whole piece of what they look like. She actually be a great person for you two to talk to, because she talks about how men will say, I just want to look a certain way and look polished and give me an outfit, give me a look. But what she'll do is she'll really sit down with them and kind of have them answer some questions and really analyze who they are and what is it of their true self they want to put out there. But a lot of men are like, well, I don't really want to talk about it or go there, or I don't even think about that myself, about going into the real me, because so much of it is a performance, it's an act. As men, we're constantly performing and asserting our masculinity, proving that we're men by the way we walk and talk and what we eat and don't eat, and what we wear and don't wear, what we watch and don't watch, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this whole thing for guys where to actually talk about the appearance that they have and what they look like, and part of that is like how they fit in clothes because of their body. I'm really skinny, or I'm a bit overweight and I can't fit into this, etc. I'd like to bulk up so I could fill this shirt up, and this is stuff that even just like saying it sounds bizarre, because how many times you hear guys saying stuff like that, but men are thinking it all the time. And the thing is, we're all thinking it because we're all projecting, we're all forced with these ideas of what a guy should look like, rather than just accepting you for yourself. So yeah, talking about body image is at the core for every man, and it's something that is such a foreign conversation for everyone, because we just don't talk about it at all.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any personal stories you'd like to share about any experiences or that you've had, or maybe someone close to you have had, that you've experienced with gender construction, like a personal story or a friend?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a few. I mean, I myself, I've put on about 80 pounds over the last 4 years as a student and doing a lot of work around this stuff. I'm being a role model means to kind of struggle and deal with your own issues, and for me, it's been a neglect of myself at the hands of my work, and being obsessed with my work and not finding a full balance, which is an issue for a lot of men, where they don't think about a lot of the other things and factors. The idea of not thinking about tomorrow, I was thinking about today, and etc. Like living on the edge and being just adventurous as a young boy, that kind of extends into your manhood. So for me, it's been a thing of needing to get to a state of health. And years ago, I had a personal trainer, and I was the kind of guy that people come to me looking for fitness tips and that kind of thing. And I had a trainer who was a woman, and she was at one point ranked second in North America in professional bodybuilding, fitness bodybuilding. And we would go to the gym together, this gym in Woodbridge. And in Woodbridge, it's a very the stereotype, but it's true. There's a lot of jocks and a lot of examples of guys who are cut and look like they're in shape, but are they really? We don't know. And it's interesting to see the dynamic of her being in that space and this kind of territorial thing where a lot of the guys would treat her terribly because they were jealous or insecure or all these different things of a woman who's coming in whose arms were bigger than theirs were. She's very very femme looking, very beautiful by society's terms, but also had a very masculine shape in the sense of muscle, etc. And she would jump on the actual weight machines, not these fancy high tech machines, and just pick up free weights and go at it with the best of them. So it was an interesting experience as a man to go in there and feel people looking at me and eyes on me to think that why is a woman training you, and even dealing with that myself and coming to terms with those questions and seeing how she was treated based on her body image, and then men started questioning their own image in my mind, because they felt that I'm supposed to be the one that's bigger, I'm supposed to be the one that's stronger. So the natural reaction was to be defensive, and then to a counterattack and treat her improperly, and that kind of thing. And so for me, it was like a time to come around thinking about a lot of my body image issues, and I'm someone that as well, like I look at the shape of my body now, and it reflects kind of what's going on inside. And I think that a person's body manifests what's happening in a lot of ways. So if you're stressed, you'll feel stress in your physical body. If you're neglecting yourself, it'll one way or another affect as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's been an issue for me, and I really can't think of a guy where it hasn't been an issue around what they look like. And you think of things that they say where either they're really overemphasizing how in shape they are, how they go to the gym and everything, and as if that's, which is great, but it's almost to the point of trying to prove that they're on top of things, or that they're capable, etc. And you have guys who will do a lot of self-deprecating humor around their body because that's their way of kind of coping and addressing those awkward conversations, right? But it's there's times where I've had conversations with men in a safe environment where they feel comfortable to kind of just disclose and talk about this stuff, saying that, yeah, I feel that pressure to look a certain way and be a certain way. And again, it doesn't matter what shape or size, right? Because no two people are meant to look the same physically. We're all just unique, but we can't accept that. We're just caught up in trying to look like someone and pretend to be something and someone that we're not.
So you talked a little bit about the pressures that guys do experience and how some of them have talked to you in an enclosed or closed space so they feel comfortable because no one's really listening in on that. How do you feel then knowing that about 10% of people with eating disorders are male?
Yeah, wow, that's an interesting statistic. It tells you that I think. Is that a stat that's? Is that in Canada or is that?
I believe it's. I've spoken to a few people. I've spoken to Eating Disorders of York Region and Sheena's Place, which is I don't know if you've heard of it, but and both of them have said that they don't have an exact number, but speculation is at approximately 10%. Yeah.
Wow, that's. I mean, to hear that, it can surprise people, but when you start to think about it, it makes sense because again, there's pressures that men are facing and things that they're not talking about. We can't talk about it. I mean, men's magazines don't really look at issues of weight. They look at, again, like I talked about, they talk about issues of appearance and look, of being in shape. So, with I think for women, there's spaces of dialogue around these issues. And that's obviously because there's so much emphasis on analyzing female appearance and perceptions and whatnot. But these things are existing for men as well. But there's pretty much no space, I think, on a mainstream level. And I think if I was an individual that was struggling with the eating disorder, I wonder as a male where I would go to. If I could even find the courage to talk about it, to admit it to my own doctor. I mean, I'm sure a physician would have a sense of what's going on with me, right? But to seek that help, I could get a contact info. Would I go out there if I could find someone? And then would I really talk about the issue? Because I could just talk about what's going on the surface, but I think with any of these issues, it's really unpacking and talking about where is this coming from, what's the underlying cause and factors. And for guys to go there is so difficult. So it's a heavy process. And again, the pieces that society reinforces for a man to not talk about it. So what's going on inside, plus everyone's kind of just pushing that along and reasserting that. So it becomes double fold the pressure on men and the reality of how hard it is to talk about this stuff.
Someone from Eating Disorders of York Region told me a story where there was a guy and he thought he had an eating disorder, or his parents speculated it, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor said to him, "No, you can't have an eating disorder. You're a guy." So he didn't get the treatment So
wow, I'm speechless. That just goes to show you. I think that be interesting. And my knowledge of the health profession is not as much in this topic, but I guarantee you there's a lot of doctors and practitioners who could use a lot of sensitivity training or awareness training around these issues and recognizing that the language they use, their attitudes, behaviors are affecting their male clients from disclosing some of the stuff that they're going through in a variety of ways. And I think that this topic specifically would be a big piece of that. And it's also, again, that there's no role modeling from the medical model of talking about this stuff and addressing it. So naturally it would trickle down to the practitioners who say, well, that's not something I need to be knowledgeable about or aware about. So and then again, it's also a thing where the male clients will be like, well, I guess this isn't the issue; it's something else,
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a thing where it's passed off, I guess, as maybe depression, or it's just you just need to have a good night's sleep or something like that. I don't know, whatever it could be, get a new job or something, and not addressing the core issue at hand and the underlying stuff. Yeah.
What do you think? How do you feel knowing that there are only a few centers in the GTA that provide free support for people with eating disorders?
Wow.
There are only about 3.
Wow, that's very depressing to think about. You see a tenth of folks that are dealing with eating disorders are identified as male. That tells us there's quite a number of men that are dealing with this, and they don't know where to turn. It's not accessible for them. So then it becomes this thing where it's such a maze and such a challenge to even talk about it. And when you do talk about it, it's probably even harder to find support. So you just push it way back inside even further and bury it and not talk about it. So I think it's definitely an issue that needs some spotlight and attention. And it's again, it's a thing where, you know, as rightfully so, we have so much conversation around women's health and these intersecting issues, but we need to also talk about it with men because they go hand in hand. The way that we create these ideas of gender, what happens to one side will affect the other as well, and in turn will affect everybody. So I mean, I guess shifting the perception is a big key around this, and just getting to talk about any issue around masculinity and the perception of what a man is in any state of being is part of that challenge to make that happen.
So society is now faced with this challenge to prevent this gender construction, so we can all go on living our lives and just be happy with the way we are. But we're making baby steps. I guess we're taking baby steps right now because it's such a big goal to obtain. Mm-hmm. What else can society do to help prevent these gender constructions and these stereotypes so people who need help can get it?
I think it's for every individual space and community, it's really being honest and reflective about pressures that we're creating for people, and recognizing that when we create a freedom for people to be who they are, regardless of what their appearance is, and that means male or female, how they identify, how they're meant to look. When you create that freedom for people to just be themselves, it allows the best to rise to the surface, right? So it allows them to, if they're in an organization or a company or a community group or a place of worship or whatever space of school, that they can come to this space and be themselves and make the environment just excel. And if everyone's coming in that space at their game and just be free to do their thing, it just benefits everyone. So it's to everyone's benefit to kind of talk about these issues that are being neglected and being dismissed, and more importantly, that are directly affecting us. Because if there's 10% of males that are dealing with eating disorders out of the collective that are dealing with eating disorders, that's a large number of men. And there's a large number of men that are dealing with all kinds of body image issues and health issues and not talking about it. And then that leads to larger issues around their attitudes and behaviors and their actions, and then societal reactions. So everything's really interconnected, and it's a big topic that needs to be explored. I think it benefits everyone to talk about these things.
Did you have anything you want to ask?
What advice do you have for guys that are struggling with body image issues?
I think one thing is to know that you're not alone. I think it's to recognize that it's not just yourself. And as a male, I would say also to create a space where, when you're with the guys, to think about the things that you say, the small, subtle things you say will create that environment where a guy will feel pressure to continue doing what they're doing and not talk about things. And guys, I think for the most part, men do want to be there for their friends, for their partners, etc., but not thinking about the effect of what they're saying, and the power of their words. Again, because of things like being a male in society, you sometimes don't have to worry about things because you're in the driver's seat. But you stop and think about how this stuff is affecting myself, how it's affecting my friends. So creating a space where it's like a guy would feel comfortable to approach the guy and say, this is kind of what I'm going through and what I'm dealing with. And it's a thing where it's hey, listen, you know what, I'm going through that too. So I think it's creating a space for others, and you'll find that you create that space for yourself as well, where you can talk about this stuff. Because I think the biggest thing is just to reach out, to open up, and come to terms yourself with something, and not to continue to distract yourself and to be in denial, but let's come to terms with it. It's okay. That it's okay to have feel vulnerable and need to ask for help and questions, and not feel secure in your physical being and your appearance. It's very common. So yeah.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to?
No. Yeah, just yeah.
What kind of stuff do you do in the workshops?
Well, we do. We look at in the workshops that we do for White Ribbon, we kind of stop and look at how we construct this idea of being a man, where it comes from, right? So the example I use, and I use in my TEDx talk, is this example of a young boy on the soccer field, and he gets hit by a soccer ball and starts to cry, And what happens is that, you know, he's feeling not so much a physical shame or pain, but a emotional pain. He's feeling shamed and embarrassed, and everyone pressures him to stop crying and to man up. And it starts from there, where he recognizes that this is what it is to be a man, and this is what it's not to be a man. And you start to look at how this impacts all different aspects of life. So again, with physical health, neglecting our health, the things we eat is another thing too. Like men will, you know, we have to like disguise healthy products in these like cool black labels and like make it all funky and exciting to eat something that's low in calorie, or not talk about the fact that it's fat free, but just make this idea that, oh, this is like the guy's drink. It's okay, it's safe, you know. Like one of the things I talk about is even like you go to Shoppers Drug Mart, there's a men's zone. So, you know, if you want to get skincare products or you want to get razors, it's okay. There's a safe zone for men, so you don't have to feel threatened or emasculated that you can go in there. So you start thinking about it in every space, every aspect of our being. There are these kinds of things happening, you know, like, you know, we talk about dancing and how, you know, some people will say that guys don't dance, or like you have to be dancing in a masculine way, and what does that mean? There's really no space or place you can bring up where this gender piece doesn't come into play. You know, whether you're in fashion, whether you're in politics, this idea of what you should be or not be. You know, we're here in the business school right now, and you think of being a leader, and this idea of being aggressive and ruthless, and saying that a feminine quality doesn't allow you to be a leader, when actually being assertive is feminine as well, and also being conscious and aware of the impact of what you're doing, and how you can, you know, be a stable part of society and not have to be ruthless to be successful. You know, those are things that are discouraged by some people, but the reality is it makes for a true leader in your space, and then what the group does. So we start talking about all these different aspects, and we start talking about, well, what is it that we can do to change that? And it's around these pieces of redefining ideas of what it is to be a man, and that's what we kind of explore with White Ribbon and talk about in, again, a variety of different ways and different aspects. So, yeah.
It's interesting because I'm interning at Canadian Family Magazine right now.
Oh wow!
And there's a lot of debate with, especially new parents, with like these new toys that come out for kids that are, like there was the most recent one I think was Lego, and they came out with this female version of Lego, and it's just, I think parents now are just trying and break down these gender.
So true.
Yeah, like it's interesting. Like I remember too when my brother played soccer when he was younger. There was a kid on his team that like everyone else would be playing the game and he'd be like picking daffodils or whatever like in the field or dandelions, and so like everyone was calling him gay just because, you know, he's not. I still know the guy. He's not gay. He just didn't want to play soccer, and it's just
that's right.
But it's just interesting to see how parents are kind of dealing with that these days. It seems like they're trying. There's more of an effort, I think, to. Yeah,
it's really interesting. Around, you know, you think of image and connection to things. There's this guy that I know who had at one point his 4-year-old son was playing with like an action figure army doll, and I called it a doll, and he was like, action figure? No, it's a doll, dude. It's a doll. Like it's got, you know, it's a little toy doll. And he got really upset by that. No, it's an action figure. Don't. My son's not gay. That whole thing. Right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There's I can send it to you. There's an app online called a Gender Mixer. And what it is basically it takes about 10 different boys commercials and girls commercials. And you can take the audio from one and the video from the other and kind of mash it up and switch it around. So what you have is you have the video of this really soft, you know, lovey-dovey, cute furry creatures and hearts and My Little Pony and that kind of thing. And you have the audio of the boys commercials, which is very aggressive and always about war and violence and that kind of thing. And you can flip it. So you'd have like, you know, you'd have this image of My Little Pony, and then you can see that they're saying, kill, go in and take over this and do that. And, you know, at an early age, it all starts these ideas of what it is that you need to, what boys do and what boys don't do and what girls do and don't do. So it's, you know, like I say in the workshops, before you're even born, like, you know, you're put in a box, and they start asking, your family is being asked questions about, you know, what's the gender, and things are already set up for you before you even get to say a word about it. So it's definitely interesting to look at, you know, in all ways how we construct this stuff, and importantly, you know, people will say, well, you got to start early, and that's true. But I think there's no time that's too late to start talking about this stuff. So.
What's interesting is I don't know if you've heard of the game Just Dance. It's on Wii.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So my cousins, they have my aunts and uncle have 3 boys, and they bought the Just Dance game for my middle cousin Lucas because he was gaining some weight. So they wanted him to be able to play video games, still have fun.
Sure.
But they got it during the summer, and then he started school again. And I went over to his house and I was like, "Hey, Lucas, like, come on, let's go play Just Dance," because I love playing that game.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, "I don't play that game anymore." And I was like, "Well, how come?" And then he was like, "Well, I want to play this game." And then he started playing, I don't know, some fighting game.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of interesting to see that once he started school, it was like he doesn't play Just Dance
Yeah,
anymore.
that's right.
I have
That's right.
a younger female cousin too, and she was like she has an older sister who was really feminine and she liked dolls and all that. But Kylie, the youngest one, she liked Spider-Man. Like everything. She had to go out and get Spider-Man shoes.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. As soon as she started school, it was like
Yeah.
she liked Dora, and she liked
Yeah.
Hannah Montana, like all that kind of stuff. It was a
Yeah.
total
Yeah.
360.
It's true.
Interesting.
It's true. And
But there's another thing I just read, and you might have heard about it, was these parents, I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl they had, but they didn't tell the kid what their gender was until they were like
Yeah.
4 years old or something
Right,
like that. Like
right.
I really can't remember if it was a boy or a girl, but they let them live up
Yeah.
until they were 4, like however, like they didn't know if they were a boy or a girl, they just,
Yeah, it's interesting
Yeah.
how that works out. My
Yeah.
neighbor has a little boy. The boy's like 7, and would hang out with these 2 girls, with the 2 daughters. And, he would like want to do like watch iCarly and things like that. And he felt pressured not to watch these shows. And he was like, you know, I want to watch them. I want to do whatever. I remember as a kid, I used to watch the girly cartoons and the boy cartoons, and I thought they were all cool. I think most guys did, but you couldn't really talk about that you watched, whatever, Strawberry Shortcake or whatever it was, right? Because you can't really talk about that at recess, But it's true, and you think about, well, who's pressuring you? It's like your parents might be, or your friends, maybe a teacher and stuff. So it's everywhere. Pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting though that a lot more parents these days, new parents, they're not asking them, they're telling the doctors, "Don't tell me what the gender of my baby is."
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really valuable because you might even want to know, but like the second it slips your mouth,
Yeah.
it's like the grandparents are buying pink things, and then
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
well, you don't really have a say in like, I don't want my child to feel that they're a girl, so
Yeah.
they have to like pink.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting that they're kind of keeping it to themselves more, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like for the couple, or if it's just a single partner having a child, the thought around what they want, what gender they want, what the sex is important, because for some fathers, it's potential fathers, it's, I don't know if I can relate to having a girl, or I don't know if I want a son, because the son's going to be wild and reckless or whatever it is. So there's a lot of that stuff that is, I think, starting to change, or people are starting to just accept and embrace. And so yeah, I'd love to have a daughter or a son, so it's cool.
It should just be that at the end of the day, if your baby is healthy, that's
Yeah,
great.
totally, absolutely. Yeah, but it's just all this stuff, it's crazy. I mean, it's. I remember I was actually doing I was moderating a panel in the business school a couple of months ago around the glass ceiling, and the event was called Breaking Your Glass Ceiling, not the glass ceiling. So the idea was that it was your responsibility to chase your dreams versus thinking about the larger structures that are impacting women across the board. So it was interesting. And then this one woman was saying how, in Asian culture, women, the math and sciences, they embrace it and they're taught it early on, and there aren't any issues around that. But then, we could talk about Asian culture and the ideas of what women are supposed to be and not be, and very domicile and subservient and stuff. And so I think a lot of people are just not even aware of and not conscious of it, So it's like getting people to stop and think and be honest and open. It's like really, don't be defensive about it, because like every one of us has things to kind of really be honest about. So let's just reflect on it and think about, I'm definitely part of something that's creating this impossible idea of what we're supposed to be. So